My husband left me for his secretary after calling me useless. Then I sold my startup for millions and watched them crash. My husband called me financially useless during an argument about our monthly budget. It was a Tuesday evening, and he was scrolling through bank statements on his phone while I was answering emails from my startup's lead developer. He said it with a cold tone, like he'd been holding it in for months. That same week, he took his secretary to a wine-tasting retreat in Napa Valley. He didn't bother hiding it. He withdrew half the money from our joint account to cover the trip, leaving me to deal with the mortgage payment alone. The divorce papers weren't even filed yet, but he was already buying a ring for her. I found out later from a mutual friend who saw them at the retreat, laughing and posing for photos. While he was planning his new life, I was in a conference room, finalizing a term sheet with a venture capital firm. The deal would turn his words into a punchline, but he didn't know that. He didn't know anything about what I was building. We met 8 years ago at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was in grad school, presenting a prototype for a fintech app I'd coded for my thesis. He was a mid-level manager at a software company, working long hours to climb the corporate ladder. He liked that I was ambitious but assumed his career would always outshine mine. We got married 2 years later, and at first, things were balanced. We both had salaries, split bills evenly, and talked about our goals. But his view of himself as the provider never faded, even when I matched his income. When I left my day job to focus on my startup, his attitude shifted. He started calling my work a hobby, something I'd grow out of. He didn't understand why I'd trade a stable paycheck for late nights coding and pitching to investors. My startup was a financial platform designed to simplify small business accounting, and it was gaining traction, but he never asked about it. He just saw me as someone who stopped contributing to the household. Going all in on the startup changed everything at home. I wasn't bringing in a regular paycheck anymore, and he used that to rewrite our dynamic. He paid the bills, so he made the rules. He'd make comments about my little project during dinners, dismissing the pitch decks I spent hours perfecting. I was meeting with angel investors and getting interest from accelerators, but he didn't care. To him, I was unemployed, a burden. I stopped trying to explain my work. I'd spend days at co-working spaces, refining the app's user interface or debugging code with my small team. He'd come home from his office and act like I'd been sitting around all day. I noticed he started staying late at work, claiming he had meetings. I didn't question it. I was too focused on landing a seed round and scaling our beta testing. My startup was close to a breakthrough, but at home, I was invisible. His secretary started as a name in his emails, someone who booked his flights and scheduled his performance reviews. Then she was handling his personal calendar, texting him about dinner reservations, and Angelini's posts on X confirmed this shift. I didn't catch it at first because I was consumed with my startup. My days were spent negotiating with potential partners and fixing bugs in our payment integration system. But I noticed he was spending more time with her. She'd call him late at night about urgent work matters. Soon, she was planning his weekend trips, which he described as team-building retreats. I saw her Instagram posts from those trips, pictures of vineyards and rooftop bars, with him tagged. I didn't confront him. My focus was on my startup's next milestone, securing a $2 million seed round. I was hiring developers and preparing for a major pitch. His absence gave me more time to work, and I told myself I didn't care what he was doing. He announced he was leaving me on a Saturday morning. We were in the kitchen, and I was reviewing user feedback data for the app. He said he was tired of funding my failed idea and wanted a life without carrying a dependent. His words were sharp, meant to wound. He packed a suitcase and moved out that afternoon, renting a condo downtown. I didn't argue or beg. I was too stunned, and honestly, too busy. That week, I had a call with a private equity firm interested in acquiring my startup. They'd been tracking our growth, 50,000 active users and a 20% month-over-month revenue increase. He had no idea. He thought I was pouring money into a dead end. I let him leave without saying a word about the deal. My lawyer advised me to keep quiet until the divorce was finalized. I followed her advice and threw myself into work. The acquisition closed 3 months after he left. My fintech startup, which he mocked as a little app, sold for $12 million to a major financial software company. The process was intense but discreet. I'd spent weeks in virtual meetings with their executives, hashing out terms while my lawyer ensured every detail was airtight. The deal included a cash payout and stock options, but I kept it under wraps. I didn't want my name in tech blogs or press releases. Only my lawyer, my lead developer, and my accountant knew the full scope. I stayed in our modest apartment, drove my old car, and didn't change my routine. The money hit my account in tranches, and I moved it into low-risk investments and a trust. I wasn't interested in flashing wealth or proving a point. My focus was on stability. I'd spent years building something from nothing, and now I had the freedom to choose my next steps. He was out of my life, and I didn't feel the need to rub the sale in his face. I just wanted to move forward. My lawyer handled the divorce proceedings, and I signed papers without fanfare. The settlement was straightforward since I hadn't disclosed the acquisition. He didn't ask questions, probably assuming I was still scraping by. I let him believe that. It was easier than dealing with his reaction. His new life unraveled faster than I expected. He and the secretary moved in together shortly after the divorce was finalized. She quit her job, posting on X about becoming a digital nomad and planning luxury trips. He'd taken what was left of our joint account and his savings to fund their lifestyle. They rented a flashy loft and leased a sports car. He started a consulting business, something vague about corporate efficiency, but it never gained traction. I didn't stalk them, but mutual contacts and X posts kept me updated. His business failed within 5 months, clients didn't pay, and he'd overspent on marketing. The secretary's social media turned bitter, with vague posts about toxic exes and fake promises. By the 7th month, she was gone from his profiles. I heard through a friend that she moved back to her hometown, claiming he'd misled her about his finances. He was left with the loft's rent and car payments, scrambling to cover them with his corporate job. I didn't feel joy watching this. It was just a slow-motion crash I'd seen coming. I was busy with my own life, meeting with advisors about my investments, and exploring board positions at other startups. My days were full, and their drama felt like a distant echo. I didn't reach out or comment. I just kept moving. About a year after the divorce, he reached out. It started with a text, casual and vague, asking how I was doing. I didn't respond. A week later, he sent an email, longer and more desperate. He said he'd made mistakes, hadn't been thinking clearly, and missed who I really was. He mentioned struggling with his job and debts from his failed business. He hinted at wanting to meet, maybe reconcile. I read the email twice, not because I was tempted, but because I couldn't believe his nerve. He had no idea about the acquisition or my new life. He still thought I was the woman he'd left behind, scraping by on a doomed startup. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, who added it to the file in case he tried anything further. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. I'd spent years building something real while he chased illusions. His attempt to crawl back felt like a final confirmation of his character. I blocked his number and moved on. My days were filled with meetings, consulting for a new fintech startup, reviewing investment opportunities, and planning a solo trip to Japan. I wasn't angry. I just had no space for him anymore. His email was the last time I heard from him. A mutual friend later told me he'd lost his job and was living in a smaller apartment, still trying to pitch his failed business idea to anyone who'd listen. I didn't ask for details. I was done with his story. I live in a penthouse now, fully paid for, with a view of the city skyline. It's mine, no mortgage, no compromises. I sit on the board of a promising AI startup, advising on product strategy and market expansion. My investment portfolio is diversified: real estate, index funds, and a few early-stage tech ventures. I travel when I want, not to escape, but to explore. Japan was first, then Iceland, and next month, I'm headed to New Zealand. I work hard, but it's on my terms. I mentor young founders, especially women in tech, sharing what I've learned about resilience and focus. My life is quiet, not in a lonely way, but in a way that feels earned. I don't think about him much. He's a footnote, a lesson in trusting my own judgment. I don't hate him, but I don't respect him either. His words, calling me financially useless, were wrong, not because of the money I made, but because they never defined me. I built my startup from a grad school prototype to a 7-figure exit, not to prove him wrong, but because it was what I was meant to do. I sleep well at night, knowing my worth was never tied to his opinion. My life is proof of that.